Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Spirit Reflections for another Around the Fire episode. My name is Fred Gouveia, and I'm very happy to bring here to the studio, to the air, around our mythical fire, a dear friend, Sunshine Beck, all the way from California, Northern California. Sunshine, welcome. Good evening.
Thank you. Welcome, Fred. Thank you.
It's very hot where you are right now, and I hope that fire analogies don't get you to think even hotter. But I think it's just so fitting that your name is Sunshine. As everybody knows who's used to our episodes, we always end with "Let the sunshine in." We've let you in early today, and we're going to end with the sunshine. So it's perfect. I'm loving the analogies.
Yes.
And Yara's here, my dear mom, right-hand producer, marketing extraordinaire. Good to see you here. She's in New York. I'm just going to leave a couple of minutes for people to come in and say hi. Also, to remind people that if you are watching on Instagram on Spirit Reflections, for you to go to the link in the bio in order to access the YouTube link, because you cannot make comments. The comments on Instagram are disabled. And so you have to go to YouTube and Facebook if you want to participate, but you're most certainly able to watch on Instagram. And if you are having any issues making comments or connecting, please do let us know. Sometimes run some glitches or issues. But in the meantime, we've got Roger. Good evening, my dear friend Roger. Welcome. Another amazing supporter of Spirit Reflections. Thanks for all your help and support. Mark, great to see you. Our dear friend Mark, who's also near your neck of the woods, right?
Yes.
Northern California in full force here. Robert Brown, hello and welcome. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to, before we introduce Sunshine and get the conversation started, I'll just mention that Spirit Reflections is a channel that started in the pandemic, and it's a universal channel. There is no particular affiliation to any philosophy, religion, doctrine, or faith, but we are open to exposing and bringing to the conversations around the fire people from all walks of life, be they scientists, artists, skeptics, philosophers, religious people, to share their personal journey, the challenges that they went through, the struggles that they were able to overcome, the victories. And by sharing that, we get inspired by seeing their life stories and empathizing with them, and also having them share the spiritual tools that they found along the way and how those tools helped shape who they are and the work that they do today. And in Sunshine's case, we're going to focus later on Spiritism as the main tool in her life that continues to shape her evolution. And so we invite you to ask your questions, join in the conversations in a very spontaneous, informal way, and also welcome you to subscribe to the channel on YouTube. That's very important for us. And enable the notifications so that you can be informed next time we have an episode coming up. And we're always open to your feedbacks and inputs, suggesting guests or spiritual tools, philosophies, arts, psychological or scientific tools that you're interested in learning more about, and we expose here. This is not meant to be a technical conversation, but merely an exposition for people to become interested and curious, to then later on learn on the internet doing their own research. So having said that, I'm going to put our opening vignette to get us in the spiritual, mythical, transcendental mood that you see here in the backdrop of this fire in the starlit sky in the middle of nature, connected in that divine communion that we've experienced from ancient times. And then we'll talk with Sunshine. All right, Sunshine, I'm going to read you your bio. So Sunshine Beck, she has a master's degree from the University of Heidelberg in Germany. And after a banking career in New York City, she moved to Chicago, where her two sons were born. And then 18 years ago, her life took a sudden turn when she was diagnosed with cancer, from which she healed completely without the intervention of allopathic medicine. And in the process, she found Spiritism, the culmination of a lifetime of studying and practicing several religious and spiritual paths. She's a certified Shiatsu, body talk, and Kundalini Yoga therapist and practitioner, a founding member of the Bezerra Spiritual Healing Center in Penryn, California, a founder of the Divine Light Spiritist Group in Nevada City, California, and she has been calling Northern California, where she is today, her home for the past 21 years. So Sunshine, welcome once again. Let's start from the beginning. Take us to the early days of your childhood and when you first became aware of something spiritual. Maybe take us back to your family life. Let us immerse in how that was like for you in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fred. Yeah, essentially, I wasn't really raised with any particular religion. It was always very important for my parents to keep an open mind. They felt, particularly my mother, felt like we don't need a church. The church is the world, is nature. And yet, both of my families, even my grandparents, were all immersed in anthroposophy. Anthroposophy is linked to Rudolf Steiner. We know it through the Waldorf schools that exist worldwide, and also anthroposophic medicine. So the only doctors that my brother and I would see would be anthroposophic doctors, actually.
Wow. So you didn't really have any allopathic medicine from the very beginning?
Well, there were a couple of vaccines that I needed to get because some of them were mandatory, but the bare minimum. So yeah, well, when I was 9 months old, I was in the hospital because I guess I thought I'm going to try to check out. I got really sick and I was in an intensive care unit for a month. So that was very traumatic.
Wow.
Other than that, and that shaped me, of course, too, because you can imagine at 9 months having tubes stick out of you, being in the hospital. Is traumatic for a baby. But no, for the rest of my life, until I became an adult and I rebelled, I didn't have any allopathic medicine experience.
Got it. Yeah. So all through the Veleda anthroposophic medications, right?
Veleda and Vala. There's also WALA when I grew up. So 2 different brands, but basically they're the same. Yeah.
Got it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and in terms of religion, I was always, when I became like 10, 11, I would go with my grandma to an Steiner church. Now, that's a Christian community that's a little bit separate, but it's linked. So it's still part of anthroposophy. It's the religious arm. It's a little bit like Spiritism, actually, all of it. It fits very well together. So I would be the one in the family, go with my grandmother to church, and I got my confirmation there too. And when we traveled, I was born and raised in Germany. We would often go to Switzerland, Austria, and Italy. And there was this thing, in Europe, you have churches in every little village. In every corner, there's a church, and the church bells ring all the time. And I always was the one in the car. I said, let's stop. Let's go into this church. Yeah. It's funny because my brother's the polar opposite.
as the case always is, right?
Yeah.
And how did you first receive this anthroposophic church culture and community experience? Like, did you rebel? Did you question, or was it sort of like a natural fit and you flowed with it?
Yeah, when I was, as I said, around 10 and I started going, it felt like a natural fit, even though I have to admit, I didn't understand it.
Okay.
I went, I think, because there was a certain feeling of the sacred that was instilled in me, but I didn't have any concepts or words around it. But I enjoyed going with my grandma, sitting in the chair. I even became something like an altar girl.
Nice.
Yeah, so holding, I don't even know the terms in English, but I
never know that. See, I always learn every time somebody comes on the air. I've never knew that there was such a thing as an anthroposophic Christian church altar girl.
Yes. Yeah, that was me too. Yes,
cool.
Exactly.
Cool.
And I played the violin as a child, so I would play the violin in the church. And,
nice. That's right.
With the organ. So yeah, it felt really good. And yet there was something off. So when I then became a teenager after my confirmation, I slowly dropped going to church because I didn't understand it. But I was very attracted to Steiner even as a young girl. I thought it was beautiful, and I had his picture hanging in my room, a younger picture of him. And yeah, I think it was in my late 20s. So then I moved to New York City. I lived there, and I mainstream, right? I went to regular doctors, had a root canal at the age of 21, completely not necessary. But, I did everything that everyone else would do. And then in my late 20s, I came across some Steiner books, and I actually started reading them. My father was deeply immersed in anthroposophy, and he would explain it to my grandmother. And as a matter of fact, one of my great aunts on my father's side worked under Steiner in the first
Goethe, and like the temple, right?
No, in the first Waldorf school in Stuttgart.
Oh, the first school in Stuttgart. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She worked there. So the roots go deep, and it's funny that both families were into it,
John's comment, you were getting introduced to Spiritism early in your life from Rudolf Steiner.
In a way, yes.
In a way, for sure, yeah.
Yes, because there's a lot of overlap. I met a Brazilian couple just a few years ago. They were part of the Bezerra Spiritual Healing Center in Penryn. And they were raised with Spiritism and switching over to anthroposophy because their son went to the Waldorf school in Sacramento. And I said, I'm the opposite. I'm switching from anthroposophy to Spiritism. Yes. So there's definitely overlap.
Cool. Yeah. So then you're in New York, you're doing all the things a young girl in New York is doing. You're in your banking career in New York City, but then at your late 20s, you begin to immerse yourself again with your roots of anthroposophy. You read the books again, and in this new moment, you have a different experience of it.
I have a different experience, and yet it doesn't seem accessible to me. On a feeling level, it lived in me. I even went to a Waldorf kindergarten as a child, but there was no school, Waldorf school in my town. And in the 60s in Germany, you would walk to school. You wouldn't commute in a car. But anyway, to go back to my late 20s, I was searching for meaning because my career wasn't coming from my heart. I felt like a hamster in the roll, just going to work and the rat race. The rat race. And New York invites you to that, of course, and this was the 80s. So I was searching and wanted to get out of my career. And so I picked up the Steiner books, and they were complicated, and that's one of the things, the anthroposophic books. He was an intellectual, and the German language tends to be puffy. It's like if you want to be intellectual, you make it extra hard. The sentences are a page long, and the verb comes all the way at the end, and you have to hold your thought. And it was like I had by then lived in New York already for many years, and it was just too difficult. So then I kept searching, and then I found Kundalini Yoga. I tried all kinds of yogas and settled for Kundalini Yoga, and I was gung-ho. I went almost every day after work, and I did the teacher training. I went to New Mexico. I actually met Yogi Bhajan. Back then, he was still alive. He was the guru of that branch of yoga, and that was very fulfilling for me.
So it maybe take us a little bit to taste, to feel what you felt actually in the doings of the yoga, the Kundalini Yoga. Any experiences that you're able to relate to us in words?
Yeah, what I really enjoyed about that type of yoga was the movement. It was always with music, and it was a very, I love to dance. I'm not a professional dancer by any means, but dancing comes very natural to me. And I spent many years dancing, even when I was younger. And there was a dancing quality to it. And that's what I liked. It was fluidic. It was with music. It touched my heart. I didn't have those words, those concepts at my disposal at the time because I was pretty bottled up in the heart area, much more intellectually oriented, but less in the heart. But it was one of the first steps for me to drop into my heart. And that I loved. And I remember there was a young girl who taught a class Sunday mornings, church time, right? I was always searching for that connection to God. And she lived literally in a shoebox. It was on Houston. It was a walk up all the way. And it was crazy. And we were piled into this little room, top floor, super hot in the summer, no AC. And she would always have the yogi tea on the stove. And, you know, it has all these spices. It was just, I loved it. You know,
all the senses bring you back, right, to something homey, right?
Yeah, it was wonderful. Yes, yeah, I loved it.
Did you feel that from Kundalini Yoga, since we're in that part of the conversation in your life, the movements, the dancing, the connection with the body, does that help you deepen your intuition, your connection with your own spirit and your guardian angel?
Back then, I wasn't there yet. Yeah, I was just, but one thing happened as a result of I did my morning sadhana too. I got way into it. There was a moment, and it scared me terribly at the time. I must have been about 30 years old, where I went out of my body. And as you can see, I have bad eyes. I had bad eyes all my life. And I was getting ready for work, and I was standing in front of my mirror in my bedroom. And all of a sudden, I'm like above myself.
So it wasn't during a yoga session, meditation, nothing. You're just getting ready to go to work.
Yeah, but it was after the morning sadhana. I would get up 4 or 5 the ambrosial hours, and I would do my practice and then get ready for work. And yeah, boom, there I was out of my body. And I thought, oh my God, you died. This is it. You're dead. That was my first feeling. And I really freaked out. And whoops, I went back into my body. But what stayed with me, and I never talked to anyone about it, it was just not fitting my world at the time, right? But what I realized, and I marveled at that, was that I could see perfectly well by being outside of my body. No more bad eyes, nothing. My vision was, and it's like, how can that be? And of course, now we know, right? Having studied Spiritism and practicing it, we know why that's possible, right? Because once we're not, it's just the organ that's dysfunctional.
Yeah. And the metaphor of that insight you had is also quite beautiful too. Not just the physical eyesight, but the metaphor about it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. It was really amazing, and it stays with me today still. And that was the one time that I had that. Yes, that was Kundalini Yoga, but that wasn't all. I kept searching. So I stayed with that for several years, but it wasn't a new career. I was very career oriented back then, right? So I said, so what can I do? And so I wanted to become a healer. So that was like, making a difference in people's worlds. That's what I really felt was closer to my heart's desire. And so I started looking at massage schools, so healing touch.
Cool.
And I traveled all the way to upstate New York and all the way to Florida, up and down the coast, finding the right school, and nothing fit. It was a very hard process for me. And then finally, right in New York City, there was an open house with a man by the name of Ohashi. And I don't know whether, because you live in New York, your mom lives in New York, whether you've come across the Ohashi Institute. But he was a little Japanese man. He had this school. I think he was somewhere in Soho. And and that hit home right away. He said one line in the open house, and that's the beginner's mind. And what is it? Beginner's mind means that we're always humble. And again, I had no
beginner's mind.
The beginner's mind doesn't matter how well you think you have mastered a field. He always stressed the beginner's mind. And
I'm going to even put this as a banner here for us to reflect on it for a few minutes. Okay.
Because it keeps us humble. And again, I didn't have those concepts, but it resonated with me. It's some piece in me knew that was the truth, for us to stay in that mindset of the beginner's mind. And I signed up that night. So I signed up for the whole training. It was like so many modules. It was a long haul. But I said, this is it. I'm going to do it. And so I did, and very laser focused. I expedited the training. And some summer they had some summer workshop in Wisconsin. And I didn't tell all my coworkers were not supposed to know about that, because it wasn't chill to work basically on Wall Street.
Like two separate worlds, literally. Yeah.
No, I mean, you read the Wall Street Journal, not even the New York Times necessarily. No, the Wall Street Journal every day was it. So what did I do? I wrapped my healing books into the Wall Street Journal.
That's brilliant. I love that.
was my little fakey approach to it. And during my lunch break, I would be studying what I wanted to
I
study.
love that. I love that.
Yeah, that was very
So
fun.
that was sort of your transition from a professional career in Wall Street to a healer's calling.
Yes, exactly. And on that expedition, and I wanted to have children. So I was very clear. So by now I was like 31, 32. And it felt like, I don't know whether any one of the listeners know, but in New York, there was this program, these young professional ladies. It's still actually airing, I think, on Netflix or so. And they were always talking about the biological clock ticking, and mine was ticking really loud. So anyway, I went to Wisconsin for this workshop, and that's where I met my second husband.
Oh,
and
nice.
So yeah, we got together pretty quickly because I was already 33 by that time and he was 36, and we both had our clocks ticking, and we got married. And that was my way out of New York and the marriage, because by that time I powered through all the programs. I think it took me 2 years, which usually takes a lot longer.
And that was for Shiatsu specifically, or other practices as well?
Shiatsu, yeah. That particular modality is Shiatsu, because Ohashi really created that curriculum and how it differs from Shiatsu. Once again, I was looking for the flowing movement. It's like a dance around the body. It's beautiful. Shiatsu is, to this day, to me, a wonderful practice. My ex-husband, who lives here locally in Nevada City, he practices still Shiatsu. He's created a little bit of his own in it, but it's a beautiful thing. It's therapeutic, and it's a dance around the body. Very fluidic, very beautiful.
So it's not just pressure points that you press really hard.
No, it's movement as well, for the practitioner as well as for the receiver.
Wonderful. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
So when you actually applied this in your clients, did you experience any spiritual insights or feelings or visions?
Well, what I learned to feel is energy. So that was the first step, because there is and I forgot the terms, but there is points and lines, energy lines, the meridians in the body, which are either filled with energy and then they're hard, they feel very hard when you touch them, or they're empty and then you kind of even fall into it. You can try it on your own body. There's spots where you literally, your finger falls into it. There was it's
hollow. It's not even soft or hard. It's just hollow.
Exactly. Yes.
Gotcha.
And then there's others that are very hard and they almost bulge out, but it's not physical, it's energetic. And through the practice of Shiatsu and the training, I learned to feel energy. And that was amazing, because at first you touch people and there's nothing. You didn't feel anything. And so that connected me with their well-being. Even I received intuitive I've actually always been quite intuitive, but didn't know about it. But I got the feedback from the clients later on that I went instinctively for the places that felt really good or they needed help with, without them explaining it to me, because it just felt guided to where, I would lean in. And yeah, so that was the beginning of feeling energy, tuning into the bigger picture.
So you meet your husband, you move to Chicago, right?
Yeah.
You have your 2 sons, which I'm sure is a life-changing experience as well.
Yeah.
And then you are in Chicago, raising your children. You are immersed in Shiatsu, in your healer's expedition. Then what happens?
Yeah, it happened that I couldn't do so much yoga and Shiatsu anymore because I had 2 babies, right? Pretty much back to back, 2 years apart. And yeah, I was a very dedicated mother. So I carried them around. I nursed them nonstop. It's like babies around me. So you can imagine there wasn't much space to be professionally active. And there was a sense of emptiness, even though I had these beautiful babies. That I didn't connect with Chicago ever in the Midwest. It just didn't feel, after New York City, it just felt so not right. And New York wasn't the right place. I knew I wouldn't want to have children in New York, for me.
Right.
And that's perfect, but for me, that wasn't the right place. And so I was again searching, and I was searching this time where to move. And so luck had it that my ex-husband got a because he was a shiatsu practitioner and had a big school in Chicago, the largest Asian bodywork school in the Midwest. And so he had a teaching assignment in Northern California. And the kids and I, we went along and we visited all the cities that had a Waldorf school north of San Luis Obispo, so in Northern California. Because one thing was clear after the kids were born, anthroposophy and Rudolf Steiner came right back into my life. It was so important for me to raise them organically, even though in my 20s in New York, I didn't even pay 1 minute attention to that. And I was raised pretty organic as a child. So that came back in. Rudolf Steiner came back in, Waldorf schools. And it was so clear that that was the only choice for me and the children. And my wasn't
one thing I learned in my little readings of anthroposophy and Steiner is that our life goes in spiral, like cycles. And we revisit those cycles in key moments of our life. So you can see how that comes back in yours too, right?
Yeah. And the interesting thing was, so there's the cycles of 11 years, there's other cycles, but there's very important consciousness shift-wise 11-year cycles. So when you look at my life at 11, I lost a brother who was born right after birth. He died. Not my brother who's alive, but another one. Okay. At 22, literally at 22, I moved to New York City. And at 33, I met my second husband and got pregnant right away with my oldest son. So you can see how and at that moment, boom, there came anthroposophy back into my life. Yeah, it was. And then I did the teacher's training for a while. There were foundation years. Excuse me, I need a little bit of.
Sure. Refreshment. The fire that we have here, it's a lot of wood and a lot of fire. It gets hot.
Yeah, gets us dry in the throat. Yeah, so I started studying it deeper. And on this trip to Northern California, this area where I still live, had 2 Waldorf schools, a charter school, which was free of charge, and a private Waldorf school. And to me, that was the best of 2 worlds, and it was clear this was it. And of course, my ex-husband wasn't aligned. He didn't know about anthroposophy. He didn't know about Waldorf schools. For him, this was all like, wait a minute, why are you so strong on this?
Right.
It was like this or nothing, So it was a little difficult, the transition, but he went along, we moved here, and
Cool.
So here we are.
So at what point then Spiritism comes into your life? I guess the next chapter in your expedition, right?
Yeah, next thing. So we lived here, and he had to fly back to Chicago because, of course, as a bodywork practitioner, it takes a while to build up your clientele, right? So he kept traveling back to Chicago. He maintained the school there. He was literally commuting to Chicago from California, which is in retrospect crazy, right? And
commute.
Yeah, and so our relationship didn't go so well, not because of that, for other reasons, and that kind of was the icing on the cake. So we separated, and then it was hard. So the kids were only 4 and 6. And I moved into the woods, into yurts, and lived totally off the grid. He was commuting to Chicago. He didn't see the kids much.
For people that don't know a lot about yurts, give us a sense of the place, please.
Mm-hmm. Yurts are Mongolian tents, and so they're living in the round. And to me, that was very appealing because the roundness is more gentle. It's more flowing, again, movement, right? So the energy doesn't get stuck in the corners because we live in square houses. It's actually important to work with the corners because we can imagine there's stagnant energy easily in the corners. So living around with a very thin membrane between the inside and the outside is a beautiful experience. It really feels
very interesting. I never thought about the impact of our homes being square with angles in the corners versus round-shaped spaces where the energy flows completely different, and how that affects our psyche, our interactions, our sleep patterns, perhaps. And in this yurts, was it like an enclosed community of many yurts? How was it?
No, I lived on my own 10 acres. I had built 3 yurts, a large one and a sleeping yurt for the kids that was kind of connected, and a 3rd yurt across the garden, which I ended up renting. No, it was just me and the kids, and a big garden and goats and chickens, and always a tenant because Yeah, it was.
I gotta show people I gotta show some photos of a yurt when I put that on Google. You correct me if that's how it kind of looks like, because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm learning about this for the first time too.
You
I had
may
heard of it, but is that
exactly.
something how it felt?
Exactly. So if you scroll down, yeah, the middle one and the one down, that's the outside. Yeah, these are the
This one?
That's it. All of them, the inside and the out. That's it. Mine was turquoise. I think one of the pictures is turquoise that you have. Yeah, the main one. So they come in different sizes, and our living yurt was 30 feet across. And yeah, you see the turquoise one was mine, just bigger.
Oh, pretty. Wow. That's so gorgeous.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is fascinating.
And you know what's also fascinating? Since you're pointing this out, you emphasize this with the living in the round. Do you know that Rudolf Steiner, his architecture never had 90-degree angles? His first Giulianum, which was in Dorlach, Switzerland, was all rounded. I don't know if people know.
I've heard about that. The main space they're called the Goetheanum, right?
Yeah, Goetheanum. And then that burned down, and the second one had more angles, but no 90-degree angles. Just to get the anthroposophic church I went to, the Spiritist community, Christian community, also had no 90-degree angles. It was all beautiful. Yeah. So again, as you can see, the early years in anthroposophy kind of impacted me to the point that I wanted to live in the round, and we did for 5 years. And the last year, the 4th year of living in these yurts, and that was pretty tough also economically.
Yeah, because you are a single mom with 2 young children living there, right? Okay.
And a very expensive private school to maintain. And my ex-husband helped out. He was a very dedicated father. So that was great. We co-parented very well. So, but anyway, so what was I going to say? Yeah. The last year, the 4th year living in the yurts, I had a friend who I had help with. I always took on some jobs because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. That was really my biggest wish. But having had a divorce, I needed to always work, right?
Right.
So I said to myself, and now in retrospect, we know what St. Augustine says about raising children. That's the most important thing, and we need to focus on it. And ideally not to go and work on, if we can help it as mothers, sure. Right? So what I did is I worked always when my kids were in school, but I would always be home which meant no career, right? So I would go from cleaning toilets at my kids' school to anything else. I worked in the office, then at the school around my kids, and I did aftercare. So anyway, I pulled myself through, and one of the jobs I did while they were in school was taking care of a young lady who was very sick. She was in bed for 10 years, constantly teetering on discarnating.
Wow.
She found John of God and found healing there. She actually healed. Unbelievable.
So she was bedridden for 10 years between life and death?
From 22 to 30, actually 11
Do you remember what was her diagnosis at the time?
She's still living here, and she has some rebounds. It's some environmental illnesses. She's allergic to everything.
Gotcha.
And so maybe it's parasites. It's so hard. She's wrestling with it again. Yeah.
Okay.
But she found healing for many, many years. He literally took the wheelchair away from her when she first came.
So she first arrived there to see John of God. She was in a wheelchair, and the first time she goes, she comes back.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she called me and said, Sunshine, you have no idea. There is this guy, and she explains about the casa and everything. And I remember to this day where I was sitting, I didn't even listen anymore. I just knew, and I'm getting chills just saying that, I needed to go. I was just like, okay, I'm going. I said, it's okay. You don't need to. So how do I find out more about him? And so she gave me friendsofthecasa.com. I still know the email address. Yeah, the website. Yeah, that's what I meant, website. And yeah, so I built the casa.
So at that time,